This is a lesson on left hand relaxation and pressure exercises. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to talk about your overall guitar technique and how important that is to relaxation. I'm going to talk about some muted exercises, so some actual exercises I use with my students to make them play with less pressure. I'll talk about a little bit of the vice grip problem between the thumb and the fingers. And I'll also talk about integrating these exercises into your practice routine and how important it is since it's such a long-term process. Now, of course, you make sure you check out my left hand technique lessons on the lesson page of the website. There's a link for that under the video. It's very important to check out the preliminary exercises because if you're using poor technique, it'll affect all of this. So there's lots of other lessons on there. There's over 100 free lessons, so check that out. Now, the first thing, before I go over some actual exercises like the muted exercises that I recommend to my students, let's just talk about your overall technique. So the first thing is that if you don't have a good technique and a solid technique and you're not using proper technique, then everything I say about relaxing might not work out. You need to have a good technique. So there's lots of videos on my website on the lesson page, starting with like just left hand position and simple exercises like from my technique book, just going through and making sure the 1 finger per fret thing feels really good. But you really need to make sure your overall technique is solid because relaxation is connected to that. If we're not playing close to the frets, it buzzes, and so the way people compensate for that is they push harder, and then it doesn't buzz. But the thing is, if you're really close to the fret, like a millimeter away from the fret, you don't have to push hard, and it won't buzz. It won't buzz if you're right next to the fret. And so therefore, the closer you are to the fret, millimeters I'm talking, the less pressure you have to use. So that's like a thing. That's like your technique is connected to relaxation. Closer to the fret you are, the less hard you have to push. The other thing that you can think about is that we make sound by pushing the string down into the metal fret, right? Which shortens the string length and gets the note that you want. So if you're playing at an angle and you're pushing the string down at an angle, it's not a very good power ratio. You're not actually pushing the string straight down into the metal. What you need to be doing is curving your finger enough that when you push the string down, and you're playing right on your fingertip, right? When you push the string down, you're actually pushing it right down into the metal. Directly down, not at an angle like this, that would push it off the guitar, but like straight down. So that means a very curved finger on your fingertip. It's kind of like your nail. You can like really see your fingernail there. It's straight on, right? So not like that, not like this, not on the pad of your finger, but really curved like this. And I talked about this before, like your power ratio is important too. If you hang a grocery bag or a backpack on your finger when it's extended, you can hurt yourself. You'll break your finger. If your finger's curved though, you can really put a lot of pressure on it. Like when, rock climbers, you can't rock climb like this. You hold on with curved fingers, and then your power ratio is really high. Now on guitar, we don't need much pressure to push down the strings. These strings are wimpy. They get pushed down so easily. But you want that power ratio there at least, because we do use some tension when we play, but it's like Charles Duncan says in his book, in his Classical Guitar 2000 or The Art of Classical Guitar Playing, there's functional tension and dysfunctional tension. And I really like that idea. So like you want to maximize though on the amount of tension that you're using and make sure that it's a good one. It feels relaxed and whatnot. So your overall technique is super important. Same thing with your guitar position. If your guitar position's bad and you're overextending your wrist, then all these tendons are weakened. It's a mess. I can't teach a student to relax if they're not using good technique. So let's go into these muted exercises. One way I teach students to play with less left-hand pressure is to play muted exercises. That's when, instead of pushing the string down to the fret, you touch the string in that spot, but it actually just makes a muted sound. So instead of this, you get this. So I'm touching the string, but I'm not pushing it down to the fret. You could just do it with the 4-fingered exercise. Instead of this, and of course you can go all the way. Those muted exercises are really cool because they teach you to do the movements. So learning how to use your hand precisely, but without any of the tension, because you're not pushing the string down. So there's no tension involved at all. So like if you were doing like a pumping nylon exercise, like O'Dare's drill, learning to do those motions, it's great. I've had students who try to do that exercise and they fail. They just can't do it because there's too much tension in their hand. I get them to do it muted and they can do it no problem. And so it becomes very clear to them, because before they might have said like, oh, I can't reach. I don't have that kind of stretch in my fingers. My hand is messed up or tense or something. But then they do it with muted and they're like, oh, I guess I can do the movements if there's no tension. And then you can slowly let the tension back in. You know, you can take a string and push down the muted, keep pushing until it starts ringing. And you'll find out that you need very little pressure to actually play with the left hand. You could even go further than this. You could do muted exercise. You could do a buzzing exercise where you push down just enough to make it buzz. So there I'm pushing it down to the fret, but only enough that it still buzzes. So it's like a halfway amount of pressure. Halfway between playing properly and playing muted. And then the next step is adding just a fraction more pressure to actually make it ring out. And you'll be surprised, like you can play guitar with very little pressure. But in our pieces, you know, like we just build pressure. It grows and it builds as we get further into the piece, and we get fatigued and we forget to like release the pressure. So this is all very, very, very important. And another thing too is like students need to learn as well to not vice grip with the thumb, right? So sometimes you might want to practice this exercise without the thumb involved. So I'll put my thumb back here, but it's not touching the guitar. Sometimes it's cool to play without the thumb. We do use our thumb on the back of the neck, but if you try playing without, you'll just get a feel for the fact that like, oh, the vice grip is not needed. We put our thumb there for like a little bit of security and point of reference, but not a lot of like actual squeezing between our thumb and fingers, or at least we try to avoid that when it's not needed. So your overall technique needs to be really solid. If it's not, none of these exercises will work for you. They won't help at all. So you need good, solid technique. So check out my left hand position videos and exercises and all that stuff. Second thing, muted exercises. Learn to do the movements without the tension, and then slowly introduce the tension back into the situation in order to see how little pressure is actually needed for it. Then also just make sure you're not adding pressure into the thumb, as in the vice grip. And then I think after all those things, you should be on the right track. The last thing I'll say is that this is a long-term process. My recommendation is do some tension or relaxation related exercises at the beginning of your practice session. If you have a left hand tension problem, do 5 to 10 minutes of tension exercises every day, and then just don't think about it too much. I mean, like if you do it at the beginning of your practice session, you'll probably think about it a little bit for the rest of your practice session. Or it'll like seep into your repertoire if you just do it at the beginning, because it'll be like a reminder that like, oh, I can play with very little pressure. So do it at the beginning of your practice session, and then just like go on with your regular practice, because you're not going to fix it in 1 or 2 days or 1 or 2 weeks. You're looking at more like a process where it gets better and better over a series of years. So it's a long-term process, but you have to start now, and you have to do it regularly to get it going. But don't stress out about it. Just do it for 5 minutes a day, and then get on with the rest of your practice, and you'll be improving it as you go and feeling good about your progress. But you can't get like frustrated with it or anything like that. You just integrate it into your practice, and keep practicing every day and enjoying your practice sessions.